there's three things that are absolutely necessary to achieve any goal. But for the purpose of this conversation, the goal of becoming a business owner. All right. The first thing is belief, right? You've got to believe that you can do it and that it can become a reality. So, in other words, you have to believe in yourself. Doesn't mean you have to know it all or have it all figured out yet, but you have to believe that you're capable of doing what it takes to not only become a business owner, but to also be successful and get the desired result that you're looking for in becoming a business owner. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for dropping into another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. I'm recording a little solo episode today because there's a topic that I actually heard someone talk about on a podcast that I listen to frequently and kind of got me fired up. And I think it's a very good and relevant topic for the time of year that we're in right now. I'm recording this on December 12th. So, right in the thick of holiday season. I think for most people, work is slowing down a little bit, and hopefully, folks are really getting ready for a great Christmas and holiday season, and also hopefully taking some time to reflect a little bit on the year that they had in 2023, what went well, where there's opportunity for improvement, looking back at any goals they may have set for themselves, and kind of doing an analysis. Did I hit these goals? And if not, how close did I come to them, and where did I miss? And at the same time, putting some thought into the upcoming year and any goals that you may have associated with the new year. I know that's something that I've been doing myself, and I'm really looking forward to over the next couple of weeks as you know business slows down a bit and I have a little more time to sit and reflect and plan and strategize. And so the inspiration for this topic came from John Mattson and his podcast, The Show. John was a guest on my show a few weeks ago. He's the founder and CEO of Superhuman, which is an online fitness coaching program. I joined the Superhuman program myself at the beginning of 2023. That was a goal that I had really set for myself for this current year, was to get in better shape, but to also really learn, how to do it sustainably instead of, some sort of a strict diet that I could maybe maintain for 30 days, but then undo any progress that I had made, in the weeks following, or, some sort of a strenuous 75 hard challenge that's just not feasible to sustain, for any period longer than that. Also really wanted to learn some of the science behind, how to work out and strength train the right way to get some of the desired results. So anyways, that's a goal that I was able to certainly make good progress in over the course of this year, largely thanks to John and his company Superhuman. But anyways, John does a great podcast called The Show, where he talks a lot about mindset and discipline, and certainly fitness, but also business, and ultimately just winning in life, and working towards becoming your best self, and really living up to your full potential. So I've really come to admire John and appreciate his insight and advice that he shares. So he recently put out a podcast where he talked about three goals that, or I'm sorry, not three goals. He talked about three things that are absolutely necessary for anyone to achieve any goal that they may set. And, that could be a goal in business, that could be a goal in fitness, that could be any sort of life goal that you have for yourself. These are three things that are going to be necessary in order to achieve that goal. All right. And he primarily talked about it through the lens of fitness, but also weaved some good business examples and advice in there as well. And it kind of got me thinking, and there's a lot of what he talked about that's very relevant to the work that I do in my consulting work through Path to Freedom, and conversations that I'm having with people on a very regular basis. So I wanted to share and relay some of John's advice here through my podcast, and really look at it through the lens of business ownership. So if business ownership is a goal that you have for yourself but have not yet realized that goal, I think all of this is very relevant and 100% applies. Also applies to anyone out there that's already a business owner and, just in growth mode and looking to improve their business and continue to grow. But in particularly, to those listening that have thought about business ownership and love the idea of becoming a business owner, but have not yet made that a reality, listen up. All right. So there's three things that are absolutely necessary to achieve any goal. But for the purpose of this conversation, the goal of becoming a business owner. All right. The first thing is belief, right? You've got to believe that you can do it and that it can become a reality. So, in other words, you have to believe in yourself. Doesn't mean you have to know it all or have it all figured out yet, but you have to believe that you're capable of doing what it takes to not only become a business owner, but to also be successful and get the desired result that you're looking for in becoming a business owner. The second thing is know-how, right? So again, not necessarily the know-how of, okay, I'm going to become a business owner and I feel like I know everything already that I'm going to need to know to be a business owner. That'll never happen. If you're waiting for that, do yourself a favor and, move on, because you're never going to wake up one day and say, all right, I think I've learned it all. I think I know everything I need to know to become a business owner and be successful. All right. There's nothing wrong with researching, studying, learning from others that have done it and been successful, and, trying to emulate what they're doing. I encourage all of that 100%, but you're never going to wake up and feel like you have it all figured out. I give the example all the time when I'm talking with people. If you're a parent, you'll get this, but you never wake up one day and say, all right, I think I know everything I need to know to be a parent, so let's go have a kid. When you have a kid for the first time, so much of it is just kind of figuring it out as you go, right? And you get to kind of, no pun intended, but you get to kind of baby step into it, right? Because when the baby's first born, it's not walking or crawling or running, it's not talking or talking back to you, right? It's a, tiny little baby, and, needs a lot of attention and care, but there's not nearly as much going on with that baby as there is when it's a year old, 2 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, right? So you get to kind of grow into it. It's the exact same, in most instances when you start a business, right? When you start a new business, unless you're buying an existing business from someone that's already operating, you're starting at zero and you get to, build that business from the ground up. So anyways, know-how in this particular instance, what I mean when I say know-how is where to start, right? Work with someone that has already done this before and can guide you, right? And help you avoid pitfalls. And I'm going to expand on each of these as we talk, but I just wanted to go ahead and kind of lay out the three criteria that are necessary to achieve any goal. So we've got belief, we've got know-how, right? And then we need willingness, right? And that's the willingness to do what it's going to take to be successful and get the desired result. right? So in the case of business ownership, it's going to require the willingness to put yourself out there, right? It's absolutely going to require the willingness to get uncomfortable, to step out of your comfort zone, to start doing things that you've never done before. In a lot of people's cases, it requires the willingness to leave the security of a W-2 job where you probably have a salary, right? Meaning how much money's coming in every 2 weeks, every month, every year, right? One of the biggest things I find that scares people from really pursuing business ownership is the benefits that come with a W-2 job. And I mean benefits in the sense of, insurance, 401k plans, all of that really can feel like a safety net for people. So the willingness to get uncomfortable and walk away from some of these things that you've become very accustomed to in order to put yourself in a position to go and achieve this goal of becoming a business owner. So willingness to potentially fail or make mistakes, right? Going to require a lot of willingness. So I'm going to kind of back up and unpack each of these a little bit more, but this is the recipe for achieving any goal. You've got to believe in yourself that you can do it. You've got to believe that it can become a reality. And then you've got to have some know-how. And again, know-how is not feeling like you have it all figured out and that you know exactly what the outcome is going to be. Know-how really means a strategy and people, resources, tools at your disposal to help guide you as you are stepping out into something new, stepping into something unknown, and starting this new venture. And then the willingness. All right. So let's back up and talk a little bit more about belief. I'm a big believer that, if you're going to set a goal, you need to get very clear and very specific on the details associated with that goal. So if the goal is business ownership, I want to become a business owner. This is something I've never done before. Well, first of all, you need to get very clear on why. Why do you want to become a business owner? Right? What is it that you believe owning your own business will allow you to do that you are not currently in a position to do as a non-business owner? All right. This is going to look different for everyone. And again, I have so many of these conversations with people um, who are thinking about the prospect of business ownership. And really what prompted me to sit down and record this episode today is the fact that, I have more conversations than I would like with people that, end up telling me, Wes, I've thought about owning my own business now for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. I talk to people that are on the tail ends of their working careers, and they tell me they've thought about owning their own business, that's been a goal of theirs for a very long time. They've just never really taken any meaningful steps in that direction. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Better late than never, right? And there's so many examples out there of entrepreneurs that went on to build massively successful businesses, and they didn't get started until very late in their careers or even very late in their lives. So I'm not saying this to discourage anyone. If that's you, if business ownership has been a goal of yours for a long time and it's just never become a reality, don't let that stop you. My point is, it seems to be a trend or a very common theme that I encounter in the types of conversations that I'm having, where people have this goal of business ownership, and they've just never really taken any meaningful steps. And I think part of that is they've never really sat down and put pen to paper and said, okay, why do I want to become a business owner? And what is that going to help me build my life into, that I believe is better than where I am today? And so common examples that I hear, when I'm having this discussion with people is, well, I want more control over my time, right? I'm tired of, kind of my schedule being dictated by my employer and the requirements of my job. And, let's stop for just a minute and get real clear that, when we're talking about business ownership, we're not talking about passive investments, right? So this is not a way to avoid hard work. And chances are, in the beginning of starting your own business, whatever that business is, you're probably going to be working harder than you were, as an employee before that, right? You may from the get-go have better control of your schedule, right? But in order to build any successful business that you own, you're going to have to put in the work and the effort, and there's absolutely going to be some grind involved, right? um but get real clear on, what it is that you want to get out of owning a business, and then you have to believe that it can become a reality, right? If you like the idea of owning a business, but you never really believe that it's possible for you, then that's more of a dream than it is a goal. Okay. So get crystal clear on the why behind this goal of owning a business. Get crystal clear on what you want to get out of that. And then find some way to believe it in your heart that it's possible. Right. And, that's a big part of why, I like to interview so many other successful entrepreneurs on this podcast. And I always, ask them questions about what I refer to as their coming up story, because my hope is that it's a good reminder to anyone out there listening that's got a goal of starting a business for themselves, that none of these other successful entrepreneurs had it all figured out when they started, and they all had to grind to get to where they are today. And all of them would also tell you that, they're not at the finish line. They don't have it all figured out, even if they've owned their own business or multiple businesses, or, built and sold businesses. They don't have it all figured out. They still have a lot to learn. They still make mistakes, but that's just part of it, right? But, listen to other people that have come before you and done what it is that you're wanting to do. In this case, own their own business, and use that as inspiration. Use that as a way to start, fueling this belief inside yourself that, hey, if these other people can do it too, so can I, right? And it may not be pretty, right? It may not be perfect. It certainly won't be perfect. But if others can do it, so can I. So that's the belief piece, right? The know-how, and the lens that I'm kind of looking at this through for the purpose of this conversation, business ownership. And if you've listened to the podcast, you know that, I specialize in franchise ownership. My wife and I own franchises, recently sold one of our franchise businesses. I've helped a lot of people get into franchises over the years. I work with, hundreds of great franchise companies out there. And so when we talk about know-how, a franchise can be a really good way to accomplish this goal of owning your own business, accompanied with some know-how from day one, right? Because what you're really getting with a franchise is you're getting a blueprint for the business. You're getting a playbook. You're also getting training, support, resources and guidance from the franchisor as well as the other franchise owners that are already in the business. And so that's a great way to tap into some know-how, whereas if you're starting a business, say from scratch, that's not part of a franchise, and nothing wrong with that. I talk to a lot of people on this podcast. My wife and I have businesses that are not franchises that we've started. So that's great too. The know-how in terms of the system and the framework that you're going to get with the franchise is not necessarily there, but there's still ways that you can, tap into someone else's know-how, right? But another piece of the know-how is just knowing where to get started. And that's another, common theme I hear as I'm talking to people about business ownership. And, in many cases that goes hand in hand with, the person I'm talking to that says, you know what, Wes, I've always had this goal of owning my own business, but it's just never happened. And a lot of times a big part of why it's never happened is that they didn't know where to get started. Right. And again, look at it in the case of owning a franchise. If you just start searching online for franchise opportunities, I mean, you're going to be up to your eyeballs in Google searches and, list of different franchise brands and, top 500 brands, top 100 brands, best low cost franchises, best, quick service franchise. I mean, there's the list and the amount of information is overwhelming to most people, and that alone in many cases is enough to keep someone from really going any further beyond just doing some very basic, very high level research online. And then there's so many other variables that have to line up, in order for business ownership to become a reality for someone. How am I going to fund it? How am I going to secure the capital that I need to start a business? Franchise or not, any business out there is going to require some level of capital, some level of investment from the business owner, right? Usually there's legal components, right? You need professional advisors. You need, probably an attorney. In the case of franchising, there are franchise attorneys that specialize in, helping buyers of franchises review the legal documentation, which is an extremely important and critical part of, getting into the right type of franchise business. Another big obstacle I see a lot of people, not overcome when they're thinking about business ownership is, well, I don't understand anything about taxes or the tax implication, or, I don't have any experience, with accounting or bookkeeping or any of these things. Right. So the point is, beyond just knowing where to get started in terms of like, okay, what types of businesses should I think about, looking at, what types of franchises should I think about looking at? There's all these other pieces that without some guidance, without, someone or a network of people that have some of this know-how and have done it before, or, specialize, it's very, very difficult to, start tackling some of these key questions and some of these key parts of, the due diligence that really is necessary to start any business. And so, myself as a franchise consultant, that's what I specialize in. And the point of this podcast is not to say, hey, work with me if business ownership is a goal of yours and you've just never realized that goal yet. I'm happy to speak with anyone that, just has questions and wants to really, look at taking a more methodical approach to understanding franchise ownership and determining if that's a direction that could make sense for them to go in. That's what I'm here for. Right. But the sole purpose of this is not to plug my services. The bigger purpose is go find someone that's done what it is you're looking to do, in this case, that has started a business or multiple businesses, and that specializes, right? So if we're talking franchise ownership, a good franchise consultant is hopefully someone that has or currently owns at least a franchise business themselves. It's, in my opinion, difficult for a franchise consultant that's never owned a franchise business themselves to guide someone through the process of selecting the right type of franchise, doing the due diligence, getting all of the other critical pieces in line, like funding, legal, tax, all of that in place to, get into a franchise business the right way. That's kind of neither here nor there. But plug in with someone that has the experience and can help guide you through the process. And just in doing that, it's going to reduce the level of overwhelm so that you can start taking methodical steps in the right direction of achieving this goal. Otherwise, you could very likely, just like many of the people I talk to, spend years and years and years thinking or dreaming about owning a business, but never making any meaningful progress in that direction. If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. The know-how piece of this is, I think, very important. Think of it as, find a coach that can help you, eat the elephant one bite at a time instead of being overwhelmed with all these different types of businesses, all these different concepts that are out there, all the different things that you need to think about and, ultimately have in place before you can become a business owner. A good coach is going to give you a framework, give you some guidance, and, probably have a network of other professionals, just like I do. I'm not an attorney, I'm not a CPA, don't try to be one on the internet either, but I have relationships with great franchise attorneys. I have relationships with CPAs that specialize in small business ownership, and several of them work exclusively with franchise business owners, bookkeeping companies, HR companies, all of these things that many people don't have any direct experience with themselves, and they let those become obstacles that keep them from working towards their goal of becoming a business owner. So the know-how is critical, but if you're willing to put yourself out there, maybe in some people's case, it's, if you're willing to let go of your ego a little bit and admit that, hey, you know what, I'm not an expert in these things and I could really benefit from some coaching or some guidance. That know-how can be a very critical step towards making your goal of becoming a business owner a reality. Just like when, I started working with Superhuman at the beginning of the year to get in better shape, right? I was someone that would have told you a year ago, yeah, you know what? I know some things about, nutrition, and, I work out regularly, and I know some things about fitness. And what I learned very quickly when I started working with experts who specialized in nutrition and fitness was that a lot of what I thought I knew wasn't accurate or just wasn't being applied correctly. And after I plugged in with some experts, I very, very quickly started to make some progress and was able to do it in a more methodical and sustainable way. So, if your goal is to own a business, plugging in with an expert to help you start working towards making that a reality is no different than, working with a trainer who is an expert in nutrition and fitness if your goal is to get in better shape and stay that way. All right, so that brings us to the third piece: willingness. All right, touched on a little bit of this earlier, but when it comes to business ownership, can't reiterate this enough, it's not passive, right? So whether the goal is to start a business while maintaining some of your other responsibilities, maybe that's a W-2 job, maybe that's, um, you own some rental properties that you manage, whatever that may be, there needs to be a willingness to adjust your lifestyle in order to realize this goal of becoming a business owner, because it's not going to be passive. And anyone that tells you that it is full of it. And my advice would be run in the other direction if they're trying to, essentially pitch you on a business opportunity where you can own a business but not have to really invest any of your time or change, your lifestyle. And when we talk about change in lifestyle, that doesn't necessarily mean negative, but it does mean different, right? And most of us are hardwired to, run away from change. And so that's kind of the next point on willingness that I also touched on earlier, but it's worth restating here. You need the willingness to get uncomfortable, especially if we're talking about first-time business owners, right? It's uncomfortable. And if you're really, looking at entirely moving away from any sort of a W-2 job with, guaranteed income and benefits, really uncomfortable to go to the other side as a business owner, where yes, the upside hopefully is much, much higher in terms of the earning potential and the financial reward than, any sort of a kind of fixed or capped income as a W-2 employee. But that's a scary thing to do, right? And it's very uncomfortable, and it's going to require some intention and some willingness on your part to put yourself out there, right? So that all kind of ties back to the belief thing that we talked about, right? Where if you don't have that belief building inside of you, again, belief and know-how doesn't mean you have it all figured out and you feel like you have a crystal ball and you know exactly what the outcome's going to be, if you do pull the trigger and become a business owner. But you've got to believe that you're capable of putting in the work and the effort. You've got to believe that, you have the fire and the grind inside of you to make it happen, even though you don't have it all figured out. And even though things will be tough and challenging at times, then the willingness piece is almost certainly going to stop you dead in your tracks, right? Because without that belief, it's next to impossible to put yourself out there and truly step out of your comfort zone, right? I think one of the biggest things that keeps people from, moving forward with becoming a business owner is the fear of failure, right? And I have this conversation all the time with people as well. You know, if failure is part of what, or if, let's just say, if the fear of failure is part of what's stopping you from becoming a business owner, first stop and really define, okay, what is failure in my mind? What is failure? Right. And then take some time to really think through, because a lot of times our minds run wild with these scenarios. When we think about failure, it's, you know, filing bankruptcy, losing my home, can't afford to feed my kids. And, those types of stories are out there, unfortunately. And you always want to, really understand the absolute worst case scenario. But, once you've done that, then also take some time to think about, okay, how likely is it that this worst case scenario actually happens? All right. And on top of that, what are things that I could proactively do that I have some level of control over that will prevent this worst case scenario from playing out? Right. And then, in addition to all of that, what are things that I could do to get myself back to where I am today if I do try this thing and I fell miserably and completely fall on my face? And what I've seen in my own life, when I've gone through this exercise, whether it's, with the idea of starting a business and, leaving a good paying job with benefits and all of that, whether it's, spending a significant amount of money to join the Superhuman fitness program, or, any other big decision that I've had to make where the fear of failure was part of what was holding me back. Anytime I've gone through that little exercise that I just described, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes because I think it's great for people to watch. I share this with a lot of people that I work with. That all for me came from Tim Ferriss, where he did a TED talk years ago, where he describes this exercise that he calls fear setting. Right. So that's basically the exercise that I just described, this fear setting. What generally happens is you realize a couple of things. One, the worst case scenarios that our minds kind of conjure up, highly unlikely that they become a reality. And a big part of the reason it's very often highly unlikely is that there are many things that, you know you have the ability to do to prevent that worst case scenario. So unless you kind of just let it happen, there's a lot of things you can do to at least pretty drastically limit, your downside, and prevent any worst case scenario from playing out. And then on top of that, you realize, even if things really don't go well, it's not going to be all that hard for me to get back to where I am today. And a lot of different examples that I could share in terms of how that applies to owning a franchise. And again, the point is not to say, hey, say F it and jump in and don't think about the downside and the worst case scenarios and just kind of hope it all works out. That's not what I'm saying at all. So please don't take that away. Business ownership is a serious thing, regardless of the amount of money that you're investing into the business. You know, Success is never going to be guaranteed, not even in a franchise. So you do need to think through all these things. Just make sure you're thinking about it in a balanced way, and not only letting your mind run wild with the worst case scenarios. Because what can happen is you convince yourself that, not only is that possible, but that it's likely. And again, that's going to stop most people from actually moving forward and becoming a business owner. So, really stop and think about, okay, what does failure look like and what can I do to prevent failure? All right. And a lot of times what we realize is that what we're more scared of is just what other people think. right? What are other people going to say when, I tell them I'm leaving this great job and starting a business? What are they going to say when I tell them about the type of business that I'm starting? And I've been there, right? When I told people we were starting a custom shelving franchise or an insulation franchise, got some weird looks, right? Um, but you got to kind of, put all of that to the side, right? This all kind of falls under that willingness category, right? Where you've got to be willing to put yourself out there and get uncomfortable. And a lot of times, a big part of that is, not worrying about what other people think, right? And if you've got the belief and you've got some level of know-how, right, that makes this willingness piece a lot easier. So I'm going to start wrapping this up, guys, but I hope this resonates with some of you, that are out there and have been thinking about business ownership, and that's a goal that you've set for yourself. Really spend some time thinking about this as we, approach the end of 2023, going into 2024, and start taking some steps in that direction if this is a goal of yours. And I'm not saying that, 2024 will be or has to be the year that you start a business, but do something other than think about it or dream about it, right? And hopefully this will, resonate and apply to other goals that you may have in your life as well. You've got to believe that it's possible and that you have what it takes. Go find some know-how. If you don't have any of the know-how and that, around that particular goal, go find someone and some resources that do. We live in an amazing time where almost unlimited information and resources are at our fingertips. So, don't let the I don't know how or I don't know where to start keep you from making any forward progress. And thirdly, think about your willingness, right? And when it comes to business ownership, if you really don't have that burning belief inside of you, if you really are not willing to make changes and to get uncomfortable and to try new things, then the time's not right, or business ownership may not be right for you, and that's perfectly fine. But if it's a goal that you can't seem to shake, then really dig deep inside of yourself and start thinking about, am I willing to make some changes, get uncomfortable, and do what it takes to realize this goal of business ownership. And I'll be the first to tell you, if I can do it, then anyone out there listening can do it if it's truly a goal that they have. Hopefully this podcast is somewhat inspiring to the aspiring business owners out there. Hopefully it's a good resource, not just myself, but the other guests, most of which are successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Hopefully some of their story and advice is inspiring to you. And I'd really encourage you to sit down, put some thought into the goals that you have next year. If business ownership is one of those goals, I am here, to help anyone and, hopefully provide some good guidance. And, I'm always happy to talk with anyone that has questions about franchise ownership and, what that entails, and, kind of the process that I use to help people take a much more methodical approach to understanding franchise ownership, knowing where to get started in terms of, what types of franchise businesses may be a good fit, and how to identify specific franchise brands that, line up with what you're looking to get out of business ownership. And then, just helping to connect dots along the way in terms of guidance when it comes to doing the research and the due diligence, connecting dots with, funding experts and funding strategies and the legal side of it and the tax and the bookkeeping side of it. That's what I do with the people that I work with. And my services are always free of charge. There's no obligation. to do anything if we talk or if we decide to work together. So I've got time for anyone that has an interest in learning more about franchise ownership and would love to talk to you. So there's a link to the website. My email address is in the show notes. Feel free to reach out if this is something that you'd like to talk more about. Hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas and holiday season and a great New Year's. We'll continue to have new podcast episodes coming out each week, leading up to New Year's and certainly into 2024. Got some good stuff planned. Make sure to check out the YouTube channel as well. We're continuing to post more video content, as well as all the full podcast episodes and video format over on YouTube. So appreciate you being here. Appreciate you listening. Hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. Go drop in and set some goals for 2024. And remember, belief, know-how, willingness. That's the recipe for achieving any goals that you may have for yourself. Thanks so much.